Okay. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. We are back again. Continuing on with our look at the triennial Torah portion. We this week are going to be looking at Leviticus 21 and 23. 3 chapters, 21, 23, and also Colossians 2 and the first 6 verses of 3, which kind of go with chapter 2. So we'll be looking at those things when we, think about where we are in terms of the we are at a portion of the Torah where Yahweh has been giving forth these commands that have to do with holiness, the set apartness, those things which actually set Israel apart, whether it be the priests or all of Israel as a whole. Last week, it was dealing with the priests. And with 22, when we look at 22, that's really dealing with also with what we've done with the priests. When we look at verses 1 and 2, Yahweh spake to Moses, saying, he tells you he's giving these commands to tell Aaron and his sons. These commands that we look at here was for Aaron and his sons, dealing with the priests.
Not the Levites.
As well. Not the Levites as a whole, but yes, the Aaron's lineage specifically. Not all of the priests. Mm-hmm. Those that had the ability to actually have been the high priest, Aaron and his sons. Okay, so let's look at these. Let's see if we want to. Let's read 22. Talk about a couple of things. I'm gonna look at 23. Let me just. Actually, let's do this. Let's look at the first 8 verses. I want to look at the first 8 verses of 22. Okay, you wanna?
Spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and to his sons, that they separate themselves from the holy things of the children of Israel, and that they profane not my holy name in those things which they hallow me. I am Yahweh. Say unto them, whosoever he be, of all your seed among the generations that goeth unto the holy things which the children of Israel hallow unto Yahweh, having his uncleanness upon him, that soul shall be cut off from my presence. I am Yahweh. What man soever of the seed of Aaron is a leper, or hath a running issue, he shall not eat of the holy things until he be clean. And whoso toucheth anything that is unclean by the dead, or a man whose seed goeth for him,
From.
from him, or whosoever toucheth any creeping thing whereby he may be made unclean, or a man of whom he may take uncleanness, whatsoever uncleanness he hath, the soul which hath touched any such shall be unclean until even as, and shall not eat of the holy things unless he wash his flesh with water. And when the sun is down, he shall be clean, and shall afterward eat of the holy things, because it is food. That which dieth for of itself, or is torn with beasts, he shall not eat to defile himself therewith. I am Yahweh. They shall therefore keep mine ordinance, lest they bear sin for it, and die therefore, and they profane it. I, Yahweh, do sanctify them.
Okay. All right. So when we look at these here commands, we dealing with we're talking about the holy gifts. What in the holy gifts in terms of, when the offerings were made, the holy gifts would be you had different offerings that all of it wasn't burnt up. Sometimes you had offerings where the priests ate what was brought. So we looked at a couple of these where it deals with if there's an uncleanness in the priest, then he wasn't able to take from the holy gifts, any uncleanness.
So if he was unclean, the part of the offering that would normally go to him, he couldn't eat it or partake in it because he was unclean.
Yeah, and it didn't make him clean either.
The gift didn't make him clean. But I'm saying that he wasn't at the altar anyway to get made clean by the altar.
Then the altar would have made him clean.
Maybe he touched it.
He said, "Man, I think. Do you remember what your go-to verse is? Actually,
Yeah.
I'll pull it out because I think that verses like these kind of go against the thought process because the whole idea was to keep uncleanness away from the holy things, whether it be the food that you eat or the tabernacle itself and the parts within it. Tirsa has this theory that whatever the altar touches, it makes it.
The altar makes it clean.
The altar makes it clean. But we have these different commands that cause us to look at the idea of keeping unclean things away from the altar and the things that were touched by the altar. Here we're talking about the holy gifts. Unless you say that Yahweh doesn't want the things that are unclean to be made unclean. I mean, the things that are unclean to be made clean, just allow them to be stayed clean. I don't really know what the point of these things would be, keeping the separation with that thought process. I wasn't even thinking about that, but then I just thought about it. So what's your verse again?
Actually, I thought it was in Leviticus.
Oh, now you can't find it.
Let me see here. Exodus.
All right, so while you're looking,
9:37.
they have the different verses, different things in terms of if the man.
Exodus 29:37. Whatever touches the altar shall be holy.
Ah. Yeah, so it's just about your interpretation of that word.
Well, I mean, I understand whatever touches it should already be holy.
Yeah. But your thought is whatever touches this thing shall be holy now.
Unto Yahweh. Yes.
As if a thing that isn't holy could touch it and then become holy. I don't think that's the thought of that.
Well, I think that if you're searching for to be made clean or whatever, you go to the altar and you become holy through the altar. I'm not going to say that it's the principal interpretation of the verse. I'm just saying that I think that's a good interpretation for the verse.
Yeah, it could be. I just think that these verses here, along with other verses,
Why is it along with other verses?
point to the idea of it being possible for those things to be profaned. Because of their holiness, they want to keep things that are unholy away
from it.
Not so that you don't accidentally make a unholy thing holy, but so you don't intermix and potentially cause this holy thing to become unholy. Something I thought that was interesting when I was looking on history. Read down to 16. You stop at 9, so read 10 to 16.
There shall no stranger eat of the holy thing, a sojourner of the priest, or an hired servant shall not eat of the holy thing. But if the priest buy any soul with his money, he shall eat of it. And he that is born in his house, they shall eat of his meat. And the priest's daughter, if the priest's daughter also be married unto a stranger, she may not eat an offering of the holy things. But if the priest's daughter be a widow or divorced and have no child, and is returned unto her father's house, as in her youth, she shall eat of her father's meat, but there shall no stranger eat thereof. And if a man eat of the holy thing unwittingly, then he shall put the fifth part thereof unto it, and shall give it unto the priest with the holy thing. And they shall not profane the holy things of the children of Israel, which they offer unto Yahweh, or suffer them to bear the iniquity of trespass when they eat their holy things. For I, Yahweh, do sanctify them.
Okay, very good. So, the thing I was thinking about is the fact that, first of all, it talks about no, what's that? Does that say layman in your, did you read layman in verse 10?
No.
What's it? What does it say, King James?
It says, there shall...
Stranger.
Yeah, stranger.
No stranger may eat. Let me see what that word is. foreigner, stranger, turn aside. No stranger may eat. A sojourner with the priest or a hired man shall not eat of the holy gifts. So they make a distinction between the stranger, the sojourner, that may be with the priest. He cannot eat. But if you was a slave, somebody who was actually the property of the priest, or you was born in the priest's house, you could eat of the food. Not necessarily, so you didn't have to be a priest, but if you was of the priest's family, then you can eat. You could partake of these holy gifts if you was actually part of the family, not a sojourner just going along with the family, but you was actually connected to the family. You was able to eat of the food. That just caused me to think about a little bit about the idea of relationship and community, intimacy, where you have the different levels, where dealing with the priests and those that were in his intimate circle, in his family, they was able to partake of these offerings, these gifts. But if you was just kind of, you was around, you was that sojourner, you was around, you was a hired person, right? Because they have the slave and then they also have the hired person, right? Where was the difference? Right, the hired person, he was just somebody who just was doing some work for a fee, but it doesn't really deal with the intimacy, I would say. It's not necessarily there. Where now you have the actual family, those that are actually born of the house, they was able to have these things. Now, so when you look where you think about this idea where this thing that's only permitted to be eaten by the priest is really like the priest's kind of thing that the priests are getting.
The compensation?
Well, I guess you can call it that, I guess, but I'm just saying the family then is covered by that priest, by that head of the family, as where the layman or the stranger or the sojourner, somebody that's around, there's inner dealings with, but there's a level of intimacy that is missing, connectedness that is missing from that person, making a distinction between the layman, the sojourner, and the slave and the actual family. And then also when you look at and the daughter, as long as she was unmarried, as long as she didn't, change her
Headship.
her covering of the priest wasn't removed and transferred to her husband, as long as she was in her father's house. So she was able to eat. But then down back to this other idea, then down to 14, if a man eats of the holy gift unintentionally, somebody who wasn't supposed to eat it, they owed. They did something that was out of order. Right? If they ate of it and unintentionally, he owed 20% then, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It didn't just make him holy whenever he ate it. Right?
Yeah.
He did it. He
I
owed.
agree.
He was
Didn't make him
indebted. He was indebted as a result of taking part of this
I mean, it's
holy gift
interesting to
that
me that he
didn't
didn't
belong.
just die. Like,
Well, you don't have to die, but
like his punishment is just
he was
Pain.
indebted.
a fine.
You know,
So you don't die if you eat it.
no, it's not
Or
a
get cut off.
it's not a sin unto death. You just owe.
Money?
Well,
I don't know.
the fifth part of it. So, say for instance, you had a leg. Maybe you owe, I don't know, maybe you owe 5 legs. The fifth part, maybe you go by weight. So maybe you had something else. You ate a pound of flesh. So now you owe a pound plus 20%.
Ha, I thought it was just like.
It says, then you shall add to it a fifth of it.
You repay it back plus.
So you need to pay that back. So if you just reduced it into terms of money, which they really didn't deal with in money so much like that, it would be dealing with what it was. So if I was like a bowl of food, a bowl of meat and some unleavened fried cakes or something that I ate, it would be what I ate plus the fifth part, which is 20%.
And you gave it to the priest so that they could eat it or whatever.
Yeah.
Somewhat you can cast it on it.
Well, if you unintentionally ate a whole like cow, that's kind of
hard.
yeah. It would have been like a plate of food. You know what I mean? So I would give you like a healthy portion of a plate of food from eating it, because I don't know how you unintentionally eat like some enormous amount.
I think that it also it's that isn't that the same as if you stole something, like the
penalty is
you repay plus 20%.
Yeah, the penalty is the same.
It's just the same.
So it
as
just
you
goes
stealing.
into the idea of you having something that doesn't belong to you.
Mm-hmm.
You're partaking of this thing that doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the priest. So if you're a stranger or anyone who's not in the listed here, then you're doing something that's out of bounds. You owe. Again, I forgot about back here when we're talking about tell Aaron and his sons, or speak to Aaron and his sons. Speak or tell is dabar. Dabar, which means to arrange, to speak, answer, appoint, command, declare, destroy, subdue, talk, teach, utter. When you look at what's going on with these words, things are being put in order. You don't think about appointing or commanding, arranging, which the word basically means to arrange. Yahweh is calling for Moses to tell Aaron to arrange the ways upon which the people move.
Mhm.
Right? So it's not just about speaking words. It's not just about words coming out of his mouth. Like there's intention behind it, and it's dealing with the arrangement, with the appointing of ways and actions, and so on and so forth. When you look at the word debar in the ancient, you have the door and the floor plan and the man's head. You think about the door, you think about movement, you think about in and out, the way in, the way out. The plan, the plan upon which the house is built, right? The blueprints. You need these things in order to put things in order.
Yeah.
Right? So the way in to the plan or the foundation of the house for man is the bar, arranging the movements, putting together the movements in a way that gives you the foundation for man. Destroy is interesting. And I think that because you have the idea of destroying, it seems that the opposite, creating, it seems, can be implied when you look at that. The idea of being able to destroy with words, right? The idea of arranging or appointing things is creation, right? If you're assembling things, putting things together in a way, taking things and putting them in order, that's creation.
Yeah.
But if you're taking away the order, right? If you're removing the order, right? That's also the same idea. It could be in the telling, in the appointing. So you can see both destroying and creating, I would say, in the law.
I was thinking that whenever Yahweh speaks, he creates an order. You know what I mean? So here he's creating an order for the priests. Because before this, there isn't an order. So anybody could think they could go ahead and partake of the priest's portion.
Right. At some point, there has to be
The delineation.
The lines have to be drawn, and there has to be some type of order or arrangement of how things are going to be, who's going to get what. It wasn't just going to be, well, if you're standing there by the priest while he's partaking of the, you wasn't going to be like, can I get a little?
Can I get a
little bit of that, little bite? Like it wasn't going to be like that.
Because even people push, one thing that people like to do is push the limits on things. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's one thing people like to do. So it's good whenever there's like a line drawn and say, these people can partake, these people can't partake.
Well, the Torah in general is about boundaries. It's about borders. It's about creating a distinction between being in and being out. Those that do this are that, and those that do that are that. Right? When you go on down throughout the rest of the chapter, from 17 down towards down towards the end where it deals with the same idea in terms of, well, we can just look at a couple of these verses. 18, speak to Aaron and to his sons and to all sons of Israel and say to them, any man of the house of Israel or of the aliens in Israel who present his offerings, whether it is any of their votive or any of their free will offerings, which they present to Yahweh for an elevation offering, a heave offering, for you to be accepted, it must be a male without defect from the cattle, sheep, and the goats. Whatever has defect, you shall not offer, for it will not be accepted for you. For a man offers a sacrifice of peace offerings to Yahweh to fulfill a special vow or a free will offering of the herd or of the flock. It must be perfect to be accepted. There shall be no defect in it. You can't bring an offering that is faulty. You can't just bring any old thing. It must be that perfect offering. So you're not just going and just grabbing whatever and giving it to Yahweh. You're going to find the best, the choicest, the most, the finest of the things, and that's what you're going to give to Yahweh.
You can't say I did my best.
No, you can't, and you can't just say, well, I'll take whatever I want, and then whatever's left over, I'll give to Yahweh. I can't pick through and find the choicest animals and say, well, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna jerk this one up for my family. And this little runt over here, this little one that got one leg that's longer than the other, I'm just gonna go ahead. I can't do nothing with that. I'm gonna get at the Yahweh. No defect, right? Those things are not accepted. So you can't take the blind or the fractured or the maimed.
The ones that can't work for you.
Yeah.
Like if you're offering a bull, you can't just take the one that can't do the work anymore.
No.
You got to take the one that can do the work the best.
Right.
And get it and offer it.
Right. So you're giving Yahweh the best. You're giving Yahweh the best. So when you think about that in terms of kind of thinking about, in life, that's what we want to give to Yahweh. Like we're not, we don't have any cattle. We don't have any sheep or goats or cows, right? Our offering is our own selves. It's our life. It's our time. So if you giving Yahweh your leftover time, I guess that's the equivalent here. What we're looking at in terms of these things that you're offering to Yahweh. If it's your leftovers, you don't want it. You don't want your leftovers. It must be perfect to be accepted. It must be the finest thing without defect. Anybody got anything to say about that?
You have anything?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, just to think of that, you have to really like go against everything that would be in you, because as humans we want the best, right? We want the best for our family. That's a difficult thing to do, is to give the best that you have, and it's a very selfless thing you have to do, and that's and I think that's the attitude we need to have in all things when it comes to, walking out this path, is to be selfless and, not be greedy and not be, uh, and not be, you know, unwilling to, give the best away. Or, just like other scriptures where it talks about if you got two coats, give one away. You know what I mean? And uh, that selfish thing is I think a real hindrance. And hey man, I fight that too. Even with my daughter, like if she wants the last tasty morsel that I got, I'd be looking at the morsel like and looking at her like, oh man, this morsel that like, I look at her, look at the morsel, I'm like, all right, go ahead. So yeah, I mean, I think it takes, special individuals to be able to do that, and that's why I think a lot of people aren't willing to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Walk is because you have to be selfless.
Yeah.
You on the back burner. So that's all I had to say.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. So, so when we look at that, it's giving us that principle of putting Yahweh first. That principle of, not trying to put yourself above Yahweh, because the only reason why you would try to give these defective offerings to Yahweh is because you would want to be trying to save the best for yourself. So definitely that idea of selflessness is something that we definitely are can see inside of this here. These, because again, when we talk about the heave offering, we talk about the elevation offering, it's a free will offering. So you're giving it of your own free will. But it really lessens it. It really takes away from it if it's your free will just to give any old thing. Right? So when we think about this in terms of, again, bringing this up to, our now situation, we have to be able to put Yahweh first, right? We have to be able to put ourselves behind Yahweh, right? We can't have these things that we are doing that may be good for us on a physical level. They're great for us, right? They're great for I, but for Yahweh, it's this unaccepted thing, right? We have to be able to look at our situation honestly, and look at ourselves and see, am I giving the Most High leftovers? Am I giving him this this retarded thing, or am I giving him the best? Am I using up all of the goodness for myself first, and then whatever's left over, then I give that to the Most High? I mean, these are some important questions, but when we look at this and we bring this into the forefront of our minds in terms of our sacrifice to Yahweh, he doesn't want, again, the leftovers. He doesn't want to be last on the list. He wants to be first. So we have to remember, I think when we look at this, seeing as how we're not bringing these offerings, right? The only offering we have is ourselves, and our time, in our lives. When we look at this, it kind of even it makes these verses like this even more valuable, right? Because it shows us the way that we need to be dealing with the Father, with our time, with our sacrifice. Are we really sacrificing to the Most High rightly, or again we're giving them leftovers? So looking at 22.
I was looking at
Oh, go ahead.
verse 32 and 22. I don't know if you was going to talk about that verse.
What do it say?
You shall not profane my holy name, but I will be sanctified among the sons of Israel. I am Yahweh who sanctifies you, who brought you out from the land of Egypt to be your Elohim. I am Yahweh. I was just thinking about how Yahweh sanctifies us. He expects us to sanctify him, or at least for us to have weight or hold weight in our minds to think of him as being sanctified. And if we have that weight in our mind of him being sanctified, then we're going to relate to him in a certain way.
Yeah, I guess that kind of begins the process by dealing with Yahweh, who's holy, and then if he's holy, then we have to deal with him in a holy way, which God's is for us to walk in holiness. So it is kind of like a domino kind of thing, even how he lays it out. I will be hallowed, he says, among the children of Israel. I am Yahweh, which hallow you, that brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your Elohim. I am Yahweh. So we even have to think about purpose, which is a thing that, talking with O'Shea, going back and forth with people, who say that they are Israel, and dealing with the, with the physical aspects. Our duty as Israel is walking in holiness. Our duty as Israel is walking upright and in righteousness. When we look at people, and they had put so much stock in the physical, the identity piece, as if that's all that there is and that's all that needs to be done. There's nothing that I need to be doing necessarily, because I am Israel, right? But we have to always understand the idea of holiness, of set apartness. We have these intricate instructions of Yahweh putting forth his commands, him arranging these ways and these plans, describing for us what holiness looks like, right? So if we're not dealing in these ways, it doesn't really matter. As I say, it doesn't really matter who your daddy is if you're not walking in his ways. You can't stake the claim to being an Israelite, and holiness is not part of your situation. And when we say holiness, we're not speaking of just in generic terms, but we're thinking about what Yahweh has spelled out for us as being holy. We can just look to right here, like what we were just looking at. Like we don't have cattle and goats and herds and so on and so forth. But your sacrifices, are you giving Yahweh his sacrifice first? You giving Yahweh the first of your strength or leftovers? If you're giving them leftovers, then there's some repenting that needs to be done. Because if you're not doing these things according to what he said, then he's saying that iniquity is upon you. That guilt is upon you. Right? When he talks about that guilt, that profaneness, right? That's the opposite of holiness. Right? So we have to be able to walk and be in holiness, and not just, it can't just be about words, but it has to be words and deeds. When we look at the next chapter, when we look at chapter 23, Leviticus 23, it's a huge chapter in terms of understanding, set apartness in regards to being Israel. And there's people that's walking around here who are calling themselves Israelites, but they're not walking in understanding in regards to Leviticus chapter 23. And you always set apart times, right? His Moedim, his Moed times. Let's move forward. Let's look at these one at a time here. Let's read the first 3 verses of 23. Nice and loud. Let's see if I can go there fast enough.
And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, concerning the feasts of Yahweh, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Even these are my feasts. 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest, and holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of Yahweh in all your dwellings.
Okay, very good. Okay. Okay, so the Shabbat. We looked at Leviticus 23. Again, so now we're looking back at before the last chapter, we was dealing with speak to the sons of Aaron. Speak to Aaron and to his sons. Now we're back to speaking to the children of Israel. Back to everybody who calls himself Israel. Everybody who is an Israelite. Now these things pertain to you. So if you want to make yourself a loophole and say those other things, well, I'm not really a Levite, I'm not a priest, so those things only pertain unto them, I would make an argument against that. But even if if I was just going to give you the benefit of the doubt on that. Here is a different story.
For everybody.
So let's, when you look, again, we're still dealing with arranging, speaking, commanding, appointing. Now we're dealing with all of Israel concerning the feasts of Yahweh, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Even these are my feasts, my holy times, my moed, my fixed seasons, my festival times, my appointed. Yahweh makes appointments. Yahweh has an appointment that's made and is set in stone, right? And we meet him at these times that he has set. I said stuff. That was funny. He said on this time. Let's get that was funny. Yahweh has these times, right, that are set. That for all those that say they are Israel, beginning with the Shabbat. The first thing that's called holy, the first thing that's ever set apart for any purpose at all is this is Shabbat, right? So we're not making, we don't make the Shabbat holy. We're remembering it. We're remembering the Shabbat and keeping it holy. We're keeping it in the place that it already is. It's this set apart time, right? If so, we got 6 days. We got 6 days to do our work. We got 6 days to do our business. All the things that we need to get done in terms of our secular life. We got 6 days to do it. Not any 6 days that we feel like doing it in. But the first day of the week, all the way through the 6th day of the week, we have to do it. But the seventh day is the Sabbath. The 7th day is the Sabbath. The 7th day is the Sabbath of Yahweh. Right? So when Yahweh,
I don't think he sang that song good enough. He wasn't singing. You're just talking it.
I know. But the point is that so it's a Sabbath of rest. Right? It's a Shabbaton. Right? It's the highest of highness of rest. So we can't get caught up in, the society that we live in regards to Shabbat, because to the world, it's Saturday. I'm able to go to the mall. I'm off work. I can go to the mall. I can get my shopping done. I can get all of my cleaning done. I can do all of these things that I wasn't able to do because of my work, right? I'm able to do these things for me, right? So when we look at this and we think back to what we just got finished looking at in terms of giving Yahweh the best, giving Yahweh the first, that's not what we're doing, right? Because the first moment we don't got to go to work. The first thing we do is, we want to see what we can get done. Even if you look at in the cycle, when you look at Sunday people, right? Well, I guess that is the first day.
First day of the week.
Well, they got it better than us. Then, I guess.
Why? Because they do it the first
Because they
day.
do their thing on the first day of the week. But Yahweh ain't even calling for us to.
We create first. We prepare for the Sabbath.
He not even calling for us to give him the first day of the week. He's saying you can have the first day all the way up to the 6th day. You can have it. Have it. Do what you got to do. Do all of your creating, just like he did. He created everything first.
He set the groundwork in order to be able to dwell or inhabit. Like he made the earth, he made man, and then he made rest.
For man. But what we do is we continue on. It's interesting what we do. He sat up here and he made all these things for man. But then he wants to be recognized at the end. So we now do all of these things for ourselves and then recognize ourselves then at the end, as opposed to recognizing the Most High. Because, just as soon we look at the world, what the world does, Friday night, you go, he's fighting that thing. On Friday night, we going out and we partying. Right? We just got paid. Friday night, parties jumping. I don't know the rest of the words. But they out there, the weekend. But we're supposed to be giving that back unto Yahweh. Right? Holy convocation. Do no work therein. The Shabbat. Okay, so.
Holy convocation.
Well,
there's people who just don't want to they don't do any work.
Yeah.
They don't convocate.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's part of the commandment.
It is.
Have a holy convocation.
It definitely is. Holy convocation. Not only you're not supposed to be working, right? That's one aspect of it, but we're supposed to come together. We're supposed to come together in the gathering, right? A set apart gathering. It says convocation, mikra, called out, meeting, assembly, rehearsal. But it's hard enough for people not to work on Shabbat. But then now you got to come together too.
Yeah, it makes it. It's definitely a challenge for people to have to cease from working. It seems like it should be easy
because
to cease.
but when we think about it, when we be honest, it's idolatry. It really is idolatry. It really is idolatry. It's where these things control you so much so that it causes you to do things that's outside of the will of Yahweh. And you'd rather do those things, or you make concessions for those things and not for the things that are of Yahweh. It's idolatry. Is what it is. And when we look, Yahweh has these set apart times that.
I mean, it seems like you literally have a day in which you should have nothing to do but convocate or have time
Right.
to get together or,
Right.
you know, fellowship, get into the
Because that's what
word.
it's for.
Because that's what it's for. So it's like he cleared your schedule out so that you have time to do it.
Well, you saying he cleared your schedule out, but
Well, you know what I mean. Okay?
yeah, theoretically.
He gave you the time.
Theoretically, he cleared your schedule out because he told you that
He
that's
told you
what your
what to
schedule
do.
should be. But we ain't always doing
Obedient.
that. So, you know, these are just things. Again, these are things. These are Yahweh's arrangements. This is how Yahweh set up. You know, he's the one that's saying what's set apart and what isn't. And this is what he's calling set apart, those that are doing all of these things. Right? This is what he is appointing as, you know, making his distinction between those things which are holy and which are not. The Shabbat, again, is right at the top. And then now when we look at these things, again, we look at these things, all the feast days, you know, we're able to see Yeshua in all these feast days, right? We're able to see Yeshua in the feast days. So when we look at Shabbat, dealing with that rest, Shabbat is really a picture of eternal rest. When we look at Shabbat, the time when we're able to rest and be and dwell with the Most High forever, right? When we have forever Shabbat, when we look towards, you know, at the end, when we dwell in the presence of the Most High, in the unadulterated presence of the Most High, what are we doing? We're resting in Him. We're dwelling in Him. We're receiving from Him, right? All of our labors and things are over, right? We're in Him, right? We're resting in His rest. It's interesting that the word convocation also means rehearsal, right? Because when we're all gathered together to be with the Father, you know, that's what we'll be doing. We'll be all together in His presence, right? So the Shabbat is a weekly remembrance of creation. It's a remembrance of creation, but it's also looking forward to our eternal rest that we have in Yahweh, those that are the Israel of Yahweh. I thought that was funny.
I mean, I think, you know, that it's important to note that it's both a remembrance of creation and also the future because, you know, some people get stuck with that. You know what I mean?
What?
They think that the Sabbath has already been fulfilled with Yeshua. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That we just take our rest in Him.
Mm-hmm.
And so because we take our rest in Him, it's not a future fulfillment. It's something that's already been fulfilled.
The people that not Christian people say stuff like that.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. Like anyone who says that the Torah is no longer something we need to do.
Oh, so I'm saying that would be like, that's kind of like Christian
a mainstream thought process, yeah. But I
there's
mean,
people that call themselves Israelites.
But there's people who call themselves Israelites who don't do the Sabbath. And there's people who call themselves Israelites who don't keep the feast days. So,
I mean, but do they not keep the Sabbath because they think it's fulfilled?
That's why some Israelites I know eat pork because they say that Yeshua, you know, with him, he did away with the Torah.
Yeah. I can't really make excuses for those people because I don't really know what the thought process is. Mm-hmm. Like why they would think that they would do such things. But when I look at Shabbat, People try to make a distinction between, well, that's that's Old Testament. That was given to Israel. Well, it was given to Israel. It was given to Israel, but it was given to mankind first.
Yeah.
And it's a remembrance of two things. It's a remembrance of creation, and it's a remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt, where Yahweh gave his people, his called out people, rest from their labors, rest from our labors, right? So it's threefold, right? Because that's what it is when you look back at it. It's a remembrance of creation. It's a remembrance of the Exodus from Egypt. But it's also looking forward to our forever rest in the Most High. Christian, you got something to say?
Oh yeah, I was going to tell you why they believe that they can eat pork and all of that. So,
oh yeah, let's hear.
Yeah, go ahead. What?
Let's hear it. I said, let's hear it.
Oh, okay, yeah. So when Peter was shown the vision of all the beast that they were not supposed to eat. Remember when he had the vision when he was about to meet up with Cornelius? And there was a blanket that came down from heaven, and it had all manner of fowl on it. And Yahweh said, "Arise, Peter, eat." And then Peter said, "Oh, never have I eaten such things." Blah blah blah. And then it came down again, and he said, "Arise, Peter, eat." And then so that's where. Do you know what scripture I'm talking about? Yeah, so that's where I had to talk with Keep Cash, and that's where they believed that the dietary law was done away with, and that they could eat whatever they want to eat now. But that's where that comes from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I see that. I see where people go and they take things that they kind of misinterpret in the New Testament, and then kind of going back and nullify. I see that, but just in the whole scope of things, I just can't understand it, because when you do that, you kind of put the New Testament against the Old Testament, as to where you use one and you throw away the other. I have a complete book here. It's one whole book. And when you have that thought process as well, one cancels out the other. That's not the point of this thing. This thing, is harmonious. It works together. And that's, but that's what we're dealing with. But again, when we're looking at this, again, this is showing us what it looks like to be an Israelite. And one of the things is, these feasts. These feasts.
You're going to be identified because you're doing feasts.
Right. The Sabbath is a sign forever, right? So there's that. Okay, so next thing we have here is verse 4 and 5 say, "These are the feasts of Yahweh, even holy convocations, which you shall proclaim in their seasons." We're just going to go through some more, right? Because he already gave you the first one, which was the Shabbat. Now he's going to go through some more, which are annual. We got Shabbat every week. We got a feast every week. But then we got these annual times, appointments throughout the year. Verse 5, "In the 14th day of the first month at even is Yahweh's Passover." So we have Passover. If, and again, not to get too much into the timing aspect of it, but we have this set apart time, which is the Passover sacrifice. The Passover is a sacrifice, right? The Passover
This
is
is a
dealing.
moment in time. This isn't.
It definitely is a moment. It is definitely is a moment in time. It's but it's dealing with the sacrifice. It's not a day.
So it's saying is when it says in the first month on the 14th day of the month at twilight is Yahweh's Passover. It's not talking about. It's talking about the sacrifice.
It's definitely talking about the
This is
sacrifice.
the sacrifice.
You have people who have Passover and have it as its own day. Its own day, and then unleavened bread is like a separate day. But there's not enough time. There's not enough time for that to be. If you say it's on the 14th day of the first month at even, that's at the end of the day.
So this we're talking about at twilight is Yahweh's Passover. That's
Sacrifice.
talking about the sacrifice.
It's talking about the sacrifice.
It's Passover sacrifice.
So traditionally, when we think about
Passover.
Yahweh's Passover, we're dealing with that evening, the evening part of the first day of unleavened bread, where we would, have our Seder meal, when we would go through the story of the Exodus. So when we think about the feasts of Yahweh, again, we have all of these significances that are attached to these things. Not only are they times that Yahweh wants for us to forever remember and to forever memorialize in our lives and to do them, but they also have significance, right? When we think about the Passover sacrifice, Yeshua was indeed the Passover sacrifice, right? Yeshua was the Passover sacrifice. So, when you think about mainstream Christianity in terms of, things that they want to not do, this is something that I don't know why they would not want to do it, because you have here the thing that basically it sets up their whole situation, right? Yeshua, the reason why you have a Savior is because he died for your sins, right? Well, in context, he did that on Passover. He was the Passover lamb. He was the Passover sacrifice. He was the Passover offering, right? Yeshua fulfilled the Passover sacrifice. Fulfilled don't mean that he did away with it. Fulfilled means that, we have now a fuller context as to where these people here are remembering the Exodus from Egypt. We too remember the Exodus from Egypt, but moreover, we remember our Exodus out of sin, out of the clutches of our sinful flesh, and that transfer of ownership from our carnal mind to Yeshua, who is our Passover, right? Which, again, it is a set apart time, but Passover actually begins the Feast of Unleavened Bread. In verse 6, where it talks about, and on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. The first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. Again, so we have now another time where no work is to be done, right? So we have the Sabbath day where we're not supposed to be doing any work. And then we had the first day of unleavened bread, again, which we're not supposed to be doing any work, right? So, you know, we can't be walking around being Israelites and then being at work on the first day of unleavened bread and saying that we Israelites. Well, I'm sitting up here looking on, scrolling down through Facebook, and people talking about going to the slave masters. Yeah, that's the word, the plantation on a holy day. And you calling yourself an Israelite.
You should be like, I'm not working on this.
I mean, it's a contradiction, right? It's a contradiction.
This is the holy day unto Yahweh, and you know, that's just not what
and
I do.
if we're gonna have Yahweh's arrangement, if we're gonna let Yahweh arrange things the way they should be and appoint things and destroy, Yahweh destroys the society that has a hold and a grip on you with his laws, statutes, and commandments. Right? And we have to be at the place where we're able to put Yahweh first and say, my God is bigger than your God, and I'm going to do what he says do instead of doing what you say. Hey, instead of doing what you say to do. Right? So when we have these times that come around, Yahweh's times, and
I'm sorry.
And we are, you know, putting his time to the side and raising up, you know, just these our employers and our bosses.
Even the school teachers. Because I remember when I was in college, you know, I would go and talk to the professors the first class and just let them know there's going to be some days that I'm not going to be here. And, you know, if that's a problem, let me know right now. You know what I mean? And a couple of them told me it was going to be a problem, and I dropped the class because if you're going to tell me up front that it's going to be a problem, then, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of them was willing to work, but there was a couple of times in the 5 years that I was there that they said to me, you know, you really need to be here for this lesson, or, you know, I'm not going to allow you to turn the paper in late, or, you know what I mean? And then it was just like, okay, so now you're giving me a choice between you and, you know, the commandment. I'm going to do what Yahweh said.
Right. And that's really how we should always view these things. If Yahweh has these set apart times, Yahweh has his appointments that he makes. Yahweh's appointments. If Yahweh makes an appointment, I'm not going to sit up there and be late for his appointment. And I'm not going to sit up here and put off his appointments for the world or for anything else. Because again, you commit an idolatry when you do that. Right? Whenever you say that thing is more important than his thing, you just raise that thing up to God level. Right? So he's giving you his calendar in Leviticus 23. He's telling you the times as to where his people come together at.
And I mean, I think it really does. It's really a valid point that this is a sign of who you are. People can tell who you are by what you do. You know what I mean? So if every year it comes around time for Passover and you're getting your matzah and everything like that, it's kind of like a sign that, that's the life that you live. That's your lifestyle. And that shows who you are.
Well, I mean,
And I mean, it's the outward thing of keeping the feast, but if we walk around here with leaven in our attitudes and everything and sin in our lives, then that's also a sign of who we are.
right. But it's not about, I mean, the Bible says it. Exodus 31 and 13 says, Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am Yahweh, that does sanctify you. So it's not even just about some thought process that, oh, that's a good concept, that these things are things that kind of signify you as an Israelite. Well, the scripture, Yahweh himself says it, right? These things are a sign between us and him. These things show that we are a way that shows that we are indeed his people. When we can put his times and appointments on top and, push the world and everything else back behind. People and these people set themselves up when they come up with these things about equal opportunity and not discriminating with religion and race and all these things. They set themselves up, and we don't really take full advantage. If you work for some people and you ever heard them sit up here and talk about how they don't discriminate, you tell them people, you go to them little websites and you print that thing out. And when they sit up here and try to be like, well, I need you to work on this. Well, I love the Lord. And these are his appointments and I can't miss.
Yeah.
And if you're going to try to sit up here and try to deny me of missing, well, look here, you said that you wasn't going to discriminate against me. You discriminated against me by trying to make it seem like you're going to fire me or something for practicing my religious practices. But sometimes, we be scared of these people more so than what we scared of the Most High. And that's what happens. I can't take these days off. This is the most important days of the thing. Like, well, again,
it's like you can't
idolatry.
You can't be fearful of people more than you're fearful of.
But people are though.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
I mean, it's because you don't want to lose your job, and you know what I mean. It's just like I remember having whenever I had the kids, whenever I had Haiti in Africa, I used all my time, my FMLA time, all my vacation time. I need to take off for the feast, and I just was like, well, it's just gonna have to be lost time without pay, It looks bad, quote unquote. And I'm like, but whatever, it just has to be what it is.
Right. We have to be able to draw a line in the sand. We have to step on Yahweh's side and stay over there. And not, kind of be wishy-washy with our situation. Right? Okay, so again, that's we looked at Shabbat, Feast of Unleavened Bread. When we look at verse 9 through 14 is dealing with first fruits, which is really about how you count towards the next feast, and not necessarily a feast in of itself.
This is Habiburim,
Yeah.
not
Just the counting of the how it is that you begin to count up to the Feast of Weeks. So when you look at verses 9 through 14, that's dealing with it is you could say that is Moed time. It is a time that is recognized by Yahweh as something that needs to be done at this time, but it's not there's no holy convocation involved. It's not a Sabbath observance. It's just
Sunday.
That's the time that you start your count that gets you up to the Feast of Weeks, which it talks about in starting with verse 15 of Leviticus chapter 23. 15 says, and you shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath. The morrow after the Sabbath is what is referred to back in 23 verse 11. But back to 15, and you shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. 7 Sabbaths shall be complete, even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall you number 50 days, and you shall offer a new offering unto Yahweh. If you go down 21, and you shall proclaim on that self same day that it may be a holy convocation unto you. You shall do no servile work therein. It shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. So forever. You're always going to be doing this forever, no matter where your dwelling is. It says, in all your dwellings throughout your generations, something that's going to be done forever. But again, we have these people who say, well, we're in exile. We can't do it. But I don't know what that means if it don't mean you're going to be doing this forever. Wherever you are, it shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings, on all the places that you live at, for all your generations. Like, I don't really know what that means if it don't mean you always gonna do it wherever you live at.
And also, I literally had a conversation recently with someone about it, that when Yahweh makes these holy times, these Moedim, these appointed times, it's the time that he's setting apart as being holy. So you can't bring this wave offering up to the tabernacle or the temple right now, but the fact of the matter is that he set this time apart as being holy unto him. So when you're being obedient to that, you're agreeing with him that the time is holy.
Yeah, the time is holy. Again, if we go back to verse 4, these are the feasts of Yahweh, even holy convocations, which you shall proclaim in their seasons.
Yeah.
In their seasons. Yeah. Time.
It's the same time.
So, yeah. So, these are things that we have to remember, ourselves as being people that follow after Yahweh, as people that are doing things that Yahweh have for us to do. Not only does he have specific ways that we are supposed to live, but here he's showing us his set apart times that he calls for us to recognize and participate in throughout our generations, in all our dwellings, all the places that we live, for as long as we both shall live. That's what it said. Okay, so again, that's the Shabbat. That's the Passover sacrifice, which we remember going into the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is 7 days. And then we had the Feast of Weeks, which we count 7 weeks, 50 days, but the set apart day where the Holy Convocation is that 1 day. So it's a 1 day feast that involves 50 days.
50-day build-up.
Right. So it's not as if there's 50 days, like a 50 days of feasts. It involves 50 days. It involves 7 weeks plus a day. But the actual feast day is that 1 day. We have inside of Leviticus 23 thrown in the mix, verse 22, where it says, and when you reap the harvest of your land, thou shalt not make clean riddance of the corners of thy field when thy reap. Neither shalt thou gather any gleanings of thy harvest. Thou shalt leave them unto the poor and to the stranger. I am Yahweh thy Elohim. So in the mix of this chapter, which really speaks exclusively to Yahweh's set apart times, is the laws of gleanings, which is kind of parenthetically thrown into the mix here, which, you know,
He really is concerned about that. Because it seemed like we read that 2 times before recently about the gleanings.
19, chapter
Yeah.
19 is brought up. But it's just reiterated here in the mix of
Talk about the harvest feast.
these feasts, which are, you know, they happen at harvest time. So while he's dealing with these set apart times that deal with, you know, you reaping your various harvests, whether it be barley or whether it be wheat. Oh yeah, by the way, don't forget about the poor folks. Don't forget about the people who don't got nothing, who ain't got nothing. Don't forget about them. And don't forget about the strangers either.
I was thinking about how, you know, when we are even keeping the Shabbat, we should think about people who are in need. And, you know, like, I remember Brother George, before he passed away, like, you know, asking for a plate of food. Like, you know, if anybody has food or whatever, because he wasn't able to, he was sick. And so, you know, like on Shabbat, you know what I mean? If you have an extra plate, you know, bring it, take it over there. He passed away by now, but I mean, I'm just saying that, you know, even when it comes to the feast days and when it comes to Shabbat, like we could get real thinking about ourselves and not thinking about, you know, the people who are in need or people who can't make it to the feast or who can't, you know what I mean?
I think when you think about the fact that we have this law that's thrown in the middle of these feast days,
It's right in the middle of this after Shavuot.
it seems as if, you know, because again, you know, I don't personally know anybody who has a farm. You know what I mean? I don't know nobody who this physically applies to, because nobody don't got no fields that they reaping. But when you think about the fact, you know, what we do on these feast times, when you think about what we do, we definitely feast. We feast for real. But I think that just the simple fact that we have this thing here in the middle of this, where it don't really, it's not connected. It's like a parenthetical interjection of remembering the poor and the stranger. As aware, you know, I think that it makes room for, at these times when we're getting together, when we're putting these big things together for ourselves, remembering those,
You don't leave people out.
people who are without. Because, they were having a holy convocation. They were having these huge gatherings. And it was dealing with a time where it was a harvest time. So it was something that they had to be mindful of. If you're thinking about, when it is, you're out there and you're gathering all of these, crops at this harvest time. So while you're doing that, remember those who don't have. So I think that is definitely something that we should probably be more proactive in thinking about at these feast times, not only dealing with creating these feasts for ourselves, but also remembering those that are without, at that time, however we're able to do so. Seeing as how though this thing is just kind of just placed in the middle. Okay, so after that we have 23 through 25, which deals with the Feast of Trumpets. Again, October. Well, I'm saying October, but it's usually around September, October. It's hard. It's a hard time when dealing with the man, because you got trumpets, you got atonement,
it's like a whole month almost.
And you got Sukkot,
yeah,
all together in a month. And
keep asking to take off work.
in this life,
it's hard.
It is hard, but this is what we gotta do. This is what we gotta do.
Taking off too much time,
but this is what we gotta do.
And laid off. It's a mess.
It's hard. It's hard, but you can't sit up here and say, "Well, I gotta do what I gotta do," because these are Yahweh's set apart times. And we look at the 7th month in the Hebrew calendar, it's packed full of times that you need to take off of work. The first day of the 7th month is trumpets. The 10th day of the 7th month is atonement. The 15th day through the 21st day is, that's what I said.
I thought you said 16.
The 15th day is Feast of Tabernacles and the last great day. All of the 7th month, where again is a holy convocation. It's a set apart time. It's Yahweh's holy days where no work is to be done. So in other words, you need to be taken off of work.
Yeah.
But we have to get to the place where we making, these decisions and deciding what's more important. What are we going to put on top? Are we going to put Yahweh's will and his ways on top? Or are we going to put our employers on top?
And he makes a way,
Well, he will make a way.
I've seen him make ways for people every time, even if they lose a job. When they come back, they're, they get a better one. Or, like for you this year, you had to turn down jobs because you was away at the feast. But when you came back, there was a job for you. So he'll make a way, and even if there is a hard time as a result of it, I've never seen someone get into a point of destitute where they're like homeless because they kept the feast day, and something happened.
Well, the Bible said he's never seen
the righteous begging for bread. So it's like you might go through a hard shit, but at the end you always come out on top.
When we think about the things that Yeshua talks about in terms of picking up your torture stake, These are things that we have to think about. When we say that we're a follower of Yeshua, there is a sacrifice that's going to come along with that. So if you think that you're supposed to just, well, I gotta go to work, I gotta have a job. Well, where's your sacrifice? What sacrifice are you making for Yeshua? Yeshua said that you pick up your torture stake and follow me. So what does that look like? That looks like you doing things for Yeshua that's countering what's going on in society and the culture.
It's just hard. I mean, I understand people having a hard time.
Well, it can be hard, but
people,
but that doesn't mean anything that is hard. It should be hard.
Miss out on promotions. I think the one rabbi we know, he was a teacher, and he actually had to take like a substitute teacher kind of position because he wasn't going to be there for so many days in October. He wasn't able to have his position still. So it's a hardship, but at the end, you're blessed because you've decided that you're going to make that sacrifice.
And I think another thing,
you'll never hear him complain about it. No. It's just something that happened.
Don't say that. I think that another thing that this causes me to think about lately is the fact that we can live this life and be a little more self-sufficient than what we kind of been trained to be. And if we spent as much time and energy building up other people's situation and put more time and energy into building our own personal situation, so where if you working for yourself, you don't have master to go to and beg off. You just taking off because it's your own situation. But we kind of, as a whole, as a people, are not self-employed. And if we worked towards that, that certainly would be a way to alleviate the stress of trying to worry about what's going to happen whenever I got to take off for the feast days. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to look at Colossians a little bit. I want to look at Colossians chapter 3.
Colossians?
Yeah. Anybody got anything to say about the Leviticus 23 and the feast days? What did I say? 3.
You said Colossians chapter 2.
Yeah, it's chapter 2. Colossians 2. Read Colossians 2 all the way down to 3, verse 6. Colossians 2 all the way down to 3, verse 6.
For I want you to know how great a struggle I have on your behalf, and for those who are at Laodicea, and for all those who have not personally seen my face, that their hearts may be encouraged, having been knit together in love and attaining to all the wealth that comes from the full assurance of understanding, resulting in a true knowledge of Elohim's mystery, that is Messiah himself, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. I say this in order that no one may delude you with persuasive arguments. For even though I am absent in body, nevertheless I am with you in spirit, rejoicing to see you, your good discipline, and the stability of your faith in Messiah. As you therefore have received Messiah Yeshua, the Master, so walk in him, having been firmly rooted, and now being built up in him and established in your faith, just as you were instructed, and overflowing with gratitude. See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of this world, rather than according to Messiah. For in him all the fullness of deity dwells in bodily form, and in him you have been made complete. And he is the head over all rule and authority. And in him you were also circumcised with the circumcision made without hand, in the removal of the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Messiah, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised up with him through faith in the working of Elohim, who raised him from the dead. And when you were dead in your transgression and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he made you alive together with him, having forgiven us all our transgressions, having canceled out the certificate of debt consisting of decrees against us, and which was hostile to us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross. When he had disarmed the rulers and authorities, he made a public display of them, having triumphed over them through him. Therefore, let no one act as your judge in regard to food or drink or in respect to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath day, things which are a shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Messiah. Let no one keep defrauding you of your prize by delighting in self-abasement and the worship of the angels, taking his stand on visions he has seen, and flayed it without cause by his fleshly mind, and not holding fast to the head, from whom the entire body, being supplied and held together by the joints and ligaments, grows with a growth which is from Elohim. If you have died with Messiah to the elementary principles of the world, why, as if you were living in the world, do you submit yourself to decrees such as do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, which all refer to things destined to perish with the using, in accordance to the commandments and teachings of men? These are matters which have, to be sure, the appearance of wisdom and self-made religion and self-abasement and severe treatment of the body, but are of no value against fleshly indulgence. If then you have been raised up with Messiah, keep seeking things above, which Messiah is seated at the right hand of Elohim. Set your mind on the things above, not the things that are on earth. For you have died and your life is hidden in Messiah and Yeshua, or in Elohim, sorry. When Messiah, who is our life, is revealed, then you also will be revealed with him in glory. Therefore, consider the members of your earthly body as dead to immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and greed, which amounts to idolatry. For it is on account of these things that the wrath of Elohim will come.
Okay.
That's a lot of reading.
Okay, so right, going all the way back, when we look back at so Paul is giving this he's written this letter to this assembly here. These people here, and he's the problem that we have when we look at these letters is that we see what Paul's response is to something, but we don't know what the something is. Like, we got to sit up here and try to decipher what the problem was, what it was that caused him to write the letter in the first place. Like, what issues is he dealing with? And the only thing we have to go by is what he's saying, which doesn't always necessarily give us, specifically what it is, that he's addressing. Right? We can try to look at it and try to figure it out, but at the end of the day, we can't be exactly sure, what he's dealing with.
Like, there's certain ones where we know what he was dealing with.
Well, because he says it specifically.
Yeah, like when he talks about the man that tried to have his father's wife or something like that.
Well, yeah, but that's
what he's talking about because he says it
That's
outright.
one of the few times where you have that. Most times, you have Paul going through these things where he's mentioned things, but you don't know exactly what it is that he's dealing with.
So he said, have your hearts be encouraged, and he has great struggle. That's what he starts with in verse 1. I have great struggle I have on your behalf, and for those who are at Laodicea, and for all those who have not personally seen my face.
Verse 2 there says that their hearts may be encouraged, having been knit together in love, and attaining to all the wealth that comes from the full assurance of understanding, resulting in a true knowledge of Elohim's mystery, that is, Messiah himself, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. One thing that I see when I see Paul's writings, in light of having an understanding of what the new covenant is, being the Spirit of Yahweh inside of you, being the Spirit of Yahweh putting the law of Yahweh in your heart and causing you to walk in his ways. When you understand what the new covenant is, it's interesting to be able to see different places when Paul speaks about the new covenant, but he's not saying, well, I'm about to talk to you about the new covenant. But he says things that cause you to see that he's talking about the new covenant. Point being, verse number 2, where he's talking about being knit together in love and attaining to all the wealth that comes from the full assurance of understanding. The only way we have full assurance of understanding is by the Spirit being inside of us and bearing witness inside of us and strengthening our understanding in the Most High and strengthening our faith in him, right? Resulting in a true knowledge of Elohim's mystery. That is Messiah himself, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. So all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are hidden in Messiah. Messiah being the mystery of Elohim. The mystery of Elohim being Yeshua, Yahweh and Yeshua in you, is the Spirit inside of you. Right? So he's talking about the Spirit being in you. That thing that actually gives you the full assurance of understanding. When we look at verses like John 14:26, Hisky, seriously. I know, but why can't you go somewhere else? Or, well, I don't understand why you're doing that right there. John 14:26 says, but the Helper, the set apart Spirit, whom the Father shall send in my name, he shall teach you all and remind you of all that I said to you. Some verses say the Comforter. King James says the Comforter. Here it says the Helper, the Holy Spirit, which the Father will send in my name. He shall teach you all and remind you of all that I said to you. When Yeshua speaks of the Ruach HaKodesh, when Yeshua speaks of the Spirit of holiness, he tells you what it's going to do. It's going to bring you all into all truth. It's going to teach you. It's going to teach you, and it's going to remind you all the things that Yeshua already done talked to you about. That's what the Spirit does inside of you. It brings you into full assurance of understanding. All of the things that are hidden, all the hidden treasures of wisdom and knowledge lie inside of the Ruach HaKodesh that Yahweh puts inside of you. And that Spirit brings those things to life inside of you. Right? So here Paul is sitting up here telling these people, telling them, be encouraged. The Spirit is inside of you. You're able to be knit together in love because of the Spirit that's inside of you. You're able to have a full assurance of understanding because of the Spirit that's inside of you. John 17:21 through 23. John 17, verses 21 through 23 says, so that they might be one as you, Father, are in me and I in you, so that they too might be one in us, so that the world might believe that you have sent me, and the esteem which you gave me, I have given them, so that they might be as one as we are one. I and them, you and me, so that they might be perfected into one, so that the world knows that you have sent me and have loved them as you loved me. Yeshua is talking about what? Him putting his Spirit in those that believe in him and bringing us together in relationship with the Father, and at the same time showing the Father and the Son to the world, which is an explanation of what? The new covenant. It's talking about the new covenant, but it's also dealing with the same thing that Paul's describing back in Colossians in chapter 2 and those first 3 verses there, dealing with that full assurance, dealing with that revelation of the hidden treasures of wisdom and knowledge.
So how do we show him the Spirit of God that's in us? Are we supposed to love one another, or is that for something else?
No, that's when we manifest the Spirit that's inside of us. That's what we're doing. We love each other, right? We walk in love, right? We manifest the character of Yahweh, which is the Spirit of Yahweh inside of us. Us manifesting his character is how we show the world Yeshua in us. And it's also how what Paul's doing here is how we're able to be encouraged in our heart, despite what goes on around us, is the fact that we have the Spirit inside of us, which is able to not let us be downtrodden by all the things that's coming together. The Spirit inside of us should knit us together, like it says right there. We should be able to be knit together in love because of the Spirit that's inside of us. If we're able to step out of the way and let the Spirit do what it's supposed to do, we should be able to be together, knit together in love. But the flesh gets in the way, unfortunately. So Paul goes on to say, verse 5, for though I am absent in body, nevertheless I am with you in spirit, rejoicing to see your good discipline and stability of your faith in Messiah. So Paul's not sitting up here saying like he sent his spirit over to the people necessarily, but he knows that the teachings that he set forth is basically what he's talking about, the teachings that he has established over there. Even though he's not over there, the things that he put in place, which is Yeshua, he is able to have faith in that. And also be able to see, as he says, rejoicing to see your good discipline and the stability of your faith. So, again, we don't know exactly what is going on over there, but Paul, I guess at some points is able to see what they're doing, and he's kind of like giving them their props for being able to be disciplined in certain areas and be able to, as he says, they're being, have a type of stability of faith, despite some of the things that there obviously, as we go on, there's obviously people going in behind him, bringing in strange doctrines, which Paul has to deal with and speak to. What he, as we read down further, as he begins to do. Verse 8, where he says, "See to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Messiah."
I am just now, I thought, when it talks about like, according to the elementary principles of men, it's like people who say, I'm going to tell you something. I don't have to tell you any scriptures to go with it. This is just my own reasoning. I don't have a need to have any Bible verses to explain my reason. That's like the reasoning of men.
Some empty deception and philosophy. But I think when he see this thing dealing with the elementary principles of the world and traditions of men, rather than according to Messiah. So he's making kind of a distinction, a separation. You have traditions of men, you have elementary principles of the world, and then you have Messiah. So we don't have to know what traditions of men are necessarily and what these elementary principles of the world are. But if we know what Messiah is, we can know what the opposite of that is. Right? So if we know what Messiah comes to do, if we understand, again, what the new covenant is Messiah came, he came and lived and died and went away and sent back his Holy Spirit so that we could walk in righteousness. That's what Yeshua came to do. Yeshua came so that he can empower us to be able to walk in his ways. But if we're weighing that against traditions of men and elementary principles, to me, I feel like that's dealing with people trying to cause people to do things in their own strength. which is going back to the old covenant, which dealt with you doing things in your own strength. Where, according to Messiah, is because of the relationship that you have with Messiah that causes you to walk in righteousness. Not because some people come along and create these rules for you and you're doing the thing according to what they want to be done, as opposed to doing something as a result of your relationship with Yeshua. Because again, Paul's here is talking about this empty deception and this philosophy, these ways of life, these traditions of men that these people are enacting and putting in place, and countering that with Messiah, whatever Messiah is, whatever that means. So he tells you what it is, what it is to be in Messiah. In verse 9, for in him, in Messiah, all the fullness of deity dwells in bodily form, and in him you have been made complete, and he is the head over all rule and authority. So again, we don't necessarily know what was going on, but it seems as if Paul feels it necessary to tell these people what Yeshua's place should be in the situation, as if to say there was these people that were trying to be above where Yeshua is, Paul felt the need to say that Yeshua is the head over all rule and authority. In him you were also circumcised with a circumcision made without hands, in the removal of the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Messiah. So we see various times where Paul is dealing with these people who they sometimes call Judaizers, people that try to make people do things. Not to say that the things necessarily are bad necessarily, but when you have to do a thing and that thing is what saves you, I think it's a problem. Where you had these people saying, well, you can't be saved unless you be circumcised. You can't be part of Israel unless you go and be circumcised. And if you was already circumcised, but it didn't have nothing to do with like, say if you wanted to go and be attached to some Jewish people, right? And become Jewish. They still want to prick you, even if you were still circumcised already, just to go through some type of action, ceremony thing, where and you can't be part of them, right, unless you do it. So again, we don't know exactly what the situation was, but if he's bringing it up, and we know that this was kind of a prevalent thing of Gentiles and Jews both believing in the Messiah, and then you'll have these ethnic Israel saying that if you want to be a part of us, then you have to be circumcised. And then Paul is constantly have to address these issues where in him he says in him you were also circumcised with the circumcision made without hands, in the removal of the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Messiah. The circumcision of Messiah. Now, I'm trying to figure out what in the world do we say? What is the circumcision of Messiah?
That's when your heart gets circumcised. Like when when your heart gets circumcised and you receive that Ruach HaKodesh on the inside of you.
We look at verse 11 here, where it says, in the second part of verse 11, in the removal of the body of the flesh by the circumcision of Messiah, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised up with him through faith in the working of Elohim, who raised him from the dead. Now, I don't know necessarily if circumcision of Messiah has anything to do with baptism, but Paul definitely did bring it up in relation to the circumcision of Messiah, making a connection between the two. When we think about walking out this life in Yeshua, and especially when you're dealing with these people who want to gravitate to the idea, well, I am Israel. What do I need to be converted to? When Peter at at Shavuot in Acts chapter 2, whenever he was talking to all of them natural born Israelites, and he went through his whole thing that he talked about in terms of being restored back to right relationship with Yahweh. Again, talking to native born Israelites. Whenever it got to the end of the situation, whenever they said, well, what must we do? He said, you need to get dunked in some water. That's what he said. So when you got these people, when they sit up here and talk about the fact that, well, I'm Israel, what do I need to? That's for people who ain't. No, it isn't. And then here, whatever Paul's sitting up here talking about, an argument can be made that the circumcision of Messiah, an argument is baptism, or at very least is connected to being buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised up with him through faith in the working of Elohim, who raised him from the dead. I don't know if the circumcision of Messiah is speaking of baptism, but what I can say is that it's definitely connected. One's definitely connected to the others, because that's what it looks like. Here, what Paul's bringing up.
So why you keep saying that you don't know if they're talking about circumcision as a part of the baptism, or you're speaking hypothetically?
It's kind of rhetorical a little bit. I mean, if you're going to back me into the corner, I think it's all connected. I think it's all speaking of one thing. Where we dealing with the circumcision of Yeshua is, yes, dealing with the circumcision of your heart, right, but the circumcision of your heart looks a certain way. And when we seen in the book of Acts, time and time again, when people heart was circumcised, when they believed the gospel message, the first thing they did was go and get baptized in water. So it's a manifestation. It's a manifestation of your internal faith.
Right. So it make other believers see that you are connected, and the old one is dead and rose up with them.
And if we say the only thing it is letting other people know what your heart is really saying, that's not enough to say that it's not necessary. Even if I'm saying that the only reason is so other people could see. Because when we look in the scripture, That's what people did.
Mhm.
They let people see this way.
Mhm.
Is you by you, and when we see verses like this where you're identifying with Messiah as he went down in the grave and rose again.
Mhm. Right.
So yeah, it's rhetorical. I'm saying I don't know the answer, but to me, that's what it looks like to me. 13. When you were dead in transgressions and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he made you alive together with him, having forgiven us all of our transgressions. 14. Having canceled out the certificate of debt consisting of decrees against us, which was hostile to us, and he has taken it out of the way, nailing it to the cross. Okay, so we talked about this probably a couple of weeks ago in terms of this verse, and somebody brought up the thing about these decrees or dogma, which were against us as being law or some kind of man-made commands. And I say that based on even where we're going with the context of if Paul's sitting there building on this idea of this circumcision of Messiah, being buried through baptism, being raised, and then verse 13, when talking about being dead in your transgressions and uncircumcision of your flesh, he made you alive together with him, having forgiven us all of our transgressions. So he says right before he says 14, dealing with forgiving your transgressions and having canceled out the certificate of debt consisting of decree. What do we say? What did King James say? Handwriting or blotting out handwriting of ordinances that was against us. So I think the first thing you got to do is figure out if we say, because some people say that that's talking about just a law, period. Torah. Some people say it's Torah. Some people say it's oral commands. But either one, it has to be contrary to us in order for it to fit. Whatever fits in that spot, whatever handwriting ordinances is, in the context, they have to be against us. And they have to be hostile to us. So when we look at, if we say that that is the law, which if you talk to like a Christian person, you know, they say, well, the law is against us. Now that's what that is, right? Look at Hebrews. Look at Hebrews chapter 8, verse 7 and 8. Hebrews chapter 8.
For if that first covenant had been 7 and 8.
Yeah.
For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. For finding fault with them, he said, behold, the days come, said, the days come, saith Yahweh, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah.
Okay, so in verse 8, where it says finding fault with them, it's not talking about finding fault with the commands, it talks about finding fault with them who is Israel, who's the people. So there wasn't a problem with the law. There's a problem with the people and our ability to be able to keep it, which your inability to keep it brings about a penalty. It brings about a curse against you, which, you know, will be something that is against you.
Stop it.
But the law in and of itself is not contrary to you, but your inability to keep it puts you in a place that is contrary to you, which brings judgment on you. That judgment is contrary to you. That judgment that you receive as a result of not being able to walk according to the law, your inability to keep it, that judgment that comes on you. But again, it has nothing to do with the law in and of itself. So the law is not contrary to you. It's not against you. There's no problem with the law. There's fault. There's fault actually with you. When we look at Romans, chapter 7, Romans chapter 7 and verse 12. Romans chapter 7 verse 12. What does that say? Romans chapter 7 verse 12. What does that say?
Wherefore the law is holy, and the commandment holy and just and good.
Okay, so the law, it says right there, is just and it's good. We can't say that there's something that's wrong with the law, right? The law is not contrary to you, right? What does Psalms 19 and 7 say?
Psalms 19 and 7.
Psalms 19, verse 7.
The law of Yahweh is perfect, restoring the soul.
So the law actually restores your soul when you keep it.
Why you gotta say it like that?
But it's perfect though and good.
He said when you keep it.
Well,
I guess
Deuteronomy 28 verse 1 says what? I think that allows me to put that caveat at the end. When you keep it. 28 verse 1 says what?
What is it?
Deuteronomy 28 verse 1.
And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of Yahweh, thy Elohim, to observe and to do all his commandments, which I command thee this day, that the Yahweh, thy Elohim, will set thee on high above all nations of the earth.
Okay, good. So if you keep the commandments, right, Yahweh say he's going to set you on high above all the nations of the earth. Right, and one more is Deuteronomy 4, 5 through 8. The commandments, the commandments of Yahweh are not against us. Deuteronomy 4, 5 through 8. What did I say?
Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as Yahweh my El commanded me, that ye should do so in the land whither ye go to the possession.
You keep going. Possess it.
Is possessing.
6 and 7.
Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great, who hath Elohim so nigh unto them, as Yahweh our Elohim is in all things that we call upon for him.
Okay, so verse 6, keep therefore and do them. This is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations. This is talking about the law, right? The law of Yahweh, the character of Yahweh humanized, which is the Torah, right? When you do it, right? When you do it, it's not contrary to you, right? It's not contrary to you, but right, it's a blessing, right? You're gonna force blessings to be upon you if you do it. But the opposite is also true. Deuteronomy 28:15. If you don't do it, right, he's gonna force curses upon you. Right? He's gonna verse 20, Deuteronomy 28:15 says, but it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of Yahweh thy Elohim, to observe and do all the commandments and the statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. So the problem is not the law. The law's not contrary to you.
Unless you don't understand.
But if you don't keep his commandments, there's going to be curses that's going to come upon you as a result of not keeping them. There's going to be penalties that's going to come against
So
you
you got that.
if you don't do what he wants for you to do.
So we got that 20% penalty. You ate the sacrifices.
Right. So
we talked about that today.
So when you don't do his commands, there's a penalty that is put on you as a result of you not doing it.
Yeah.
What?
And it'll also go on to say what else will be cursed.
It says all kinds of things are going to be cursed. It talk about being cursed for about 50 verses. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so we can't say like the mainstream says that the law is the thing that's contrary to us. But we begin to see that the penalty of not keeping the law is contrary to us, which actually makes sense when you talk about something being nailed to the cross, when his blood was shed for my sin. His blood was shed for my sin, for my breaking of the commandment and the curse that was put upon me. We see verses that tells that Yeshua was made a curse for us. He received the penalty of my sin. He did that when? On the cross. Okay, so the idea that this is talking about man's oral laws and traditions, again, as far as being something that's against us, when we look at what man's oral laws and traditions are, these things in and of themselves are actually for us. They help keep us. When we think about, the oral commands, they're things that people set in place as something to keep us from breaking the commandment in the first place. So we have the commandments, and then we come up with these oral laws that kind of guard us from keeping the commandments. So, from breaking them. Right? So it in and of itself is not something that we could say is against us. And I'm saying that it's certainly not something that's even worth Yeshua canceling the thing out in the first place, because Yahweh don't really care about man's commandments.
Right.
So what does Yeshua down on the cross have to do anything with man's commands? So when we look, for instance, when we look at Yeshua actually was for Yeshua actually was for and against the oral commands simultaneously. He was on the fence when it came to the oral commands. Yeshua was. Some things he did, some things he didn't do. He took it or left it. Right? Some things he liked, some things he didn't like, so he didn't do it. It wasn't something that he was bound by any means. And we can see in things, even when we look, when the Pharisees came and asked him about the greatest command, the answer that he gives, he goes through the Shema. He goes through loving Yahweh with all your heart and with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. When he gave that answer about that command being the greatest command, that's something that deals with the oral tradition. So he agreed with the oral traditions by having that specific answer. When we look, okay, so there was a thing called the silver rule.
Not the golden rule.
There was a thing called the silver rule, and this was by Hillel, one of the Jewish sages. The silver rule was, do not do to others as you would not have them do to you. Is the negative of what Yeshua says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But Hillel, who was somebody who was a contemporary in terms of the sages of that time, had this silver rule where he says the negative, and Yeshua comes along and says the positive of the thing that's already something that's
already teaching.
Yeah. What they would say was, do not do to others as you would not have them do to you. But Yeshua just said it in a positive way. And now, we call this the golden rule. Right? So we see where Yeshua affirms these oral traditions. But then we see other places where he could care less. So you want to sit up here and talk to me about washing hands, and now I'm defiled because nobody didn't wash their hands. He don't care. He could care less about these people's traditions in that regard. But if we can say where Yeshua kind of takes a neutral stance on this whole idea of oral tradition, we can't sit up and really say that it's something that's contrary to us, because it's not all the way contrary to it. No, it doesn't. So when we look at verses like Romans chapter 5, verse 10. Romans chapter 5, verse 10. Much more than being now justified by his blood, we shall. Oh, hold on. What did I say? Romans 5. I'll just read 9 and 10. Much more than being now justified by his blood, we shall be saved from wrath through him. For if, when we were enemies, we were reconciled to Elohim by the death of his son, much more being reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. So if we're reconciled by his death, verse 9 said we was justified by his blood. When we think about the idea of something being nailed to the cross, we have to be speaking about the penalty that's against us, which is death. Which is the fact that when we do sin certain sins, there's guilt that's attached with that sin, and that guilt is forever with you, lest you give that thing over to Yeshua. Right? So the penalty is the thing that's against you.
Mm-hmm.
The penalty is what's nailed to the cross. The penalty is what's hostile to you. And because of what Yeshua has done, he moves that thing out of the way. You're able to not be dead as a result of your sin.
He took that debt.
He took the debt. He paid the debt. He did not.
But we also have to ask him to repent of that thing so he can take that debt.
Right.
I mean, he just don't come along and say, I'm taking
Right.
that debt.
It's not just broad stroke. Everybody's now saved from sin because I died. You have to apply that to your life
and
through repentance. Something happened with this. You guys hear me still?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, the video froze up for some reason. This is the forces of evil coming against this word that's coming out. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so I'm saying that since we have Ephesians verse 1 and 7. Ephesians verse 1 and 7 says, Ephesians verse 1 and 7 says, in whom we have redemption through his blood for forgiveness of sins according to the riches of his grace. The redemption, the fixing of our relationship, the fact that we was hostile, we were at enmity with Elohim. There was a separation. There was wrath that was owed to us. We had a ticket that said you deserve death. And Yeshua nailed that thing to the cross and redeemed us by his blood, right? We're redeemed by his blood, right? And then verse 15 of Colossians, I think, solidifies this fact that the thing that was against us was the death that's associated with the breaking of y'all's of sin, right? But when verse 15 says, when he had disarmed the rulers and authorities, he made a public display of them, having triumphed over them through him. What in the world is that talking about right there? When he had disarmed the rulers and authorities, he made a public display of them, having triumphed over them through him. What is he referring to right there when he's saying that?
The rulers and authorities.
What verse is that?
Verse Colossians 2, back to Colossians, verse 2 and 15. My fault. Chapter 2, verse 15.
Christian is unmuted.
You got the answer, Chris?
Well, I got a lot to say about that because the open display he made was him going against the Pharisees and Sadducees. So he made an open display, and the ordinances that he was against was all of their, and they added on to the law their interpretations and basically putting on people things that they themselves weren't even keeping. And the open display he made of them was him in the public basically rebuking them for their teachings.
But what about on the cross, though? How does 15 connect with 14?
Well,
with his death.
Yeshua basically opened it up to bypass the Pharisees and Sadducees. Now all men could come to the feet of Yeshua themselves. There was no, he basically broke down the walls. The ordinances that the Pharisees were putting against the people were prohibiting them from getting to Yahweh. So now
I think that you're not looking at this with a big enough lens, right? Because when we look at 14 and we're talking about something that happened at Calvary, right? It's way bigger. It's way bigger than the Pharisees and the Sadducees, right? When we talk about spoiling principalities and powers, right? That's dealing with death. That's dealing with death, where death is no longer something that is owed to you, right? We talking about everlasting life that you receive as a result of your connectedness or your reconnectedness to the Father, which happened where? At Calvary, right? We gotta look at it at a broader picture than just some little small thing that Yeshua did in terms of countering his thought processes with the Pharisees, because here Paul is talking about something bigger, right? Which is dealing with what exactly it was that happened with what Yeshua did on Calvary. Which, if we look at 13, where it says, and you being dead in your sins and the uncircumcision of your flesh, hath he quickened together with himself, forgiving you of all trespasses. The trespasses is a thing that was against you. You had these trespasses, you had this guilt that's attached to you, and unless you do something about this guilt, about this iniquity that you will be dwelling in, unless you do something about it, what you gonna do? So Yeshua comes in and blots out the penalty that is against you, which is these transgressions that you are now being forgiven of, and cancels that debt. He cancels your debt. And when did he do it? At Calvary. That's when he did it. And then when he did it, he causes you to be victorious over what? Over, which is death. He causes you to be able to have everlasting life and connectedness to the Father, as opposed to separation, which you cause with your sin. So as I can see that, yes, you can say that Yeshua did indeed counter the oral traditions of the Pharisees. But I also showed where he was really neutral about it in general. In fact, there's some place where he says, the Pharisees sit in the seat of Moses. You do what they say do, but don't do what they do. But do what they say, but don't do what they do. But here is a broader thing that's dealing with our very soul and our salvation, which is far and above just that little part that's dealing with the traditions of men. Now, I will say that in this chapter, we can see where that idea of the traditions of men is indeed being countered. That I can't deny that. But I'm saying this portion here is dealing with the totality of the issue and what it is that Yeshua actually did at Calvary, which it wasn't just nailing traditions of men to the cross, but nailing the thing that was against you, that was contrary to you. Because again, the traditions of men in and of themselves aren't contrary to you. There are ways, they are indeed ways that will keep you in the way. But when I sit up here and try to rise those things up above the commandment, so what I do with the traditions of men is bad. Not saying that traditions of men are bad, because again, Yeshua kept some and he didn't keep others. But I think that the thing that's against you here, it's against everybody worldwide, is the penalty that comes as a result of you not of sin, the penalty of sin. And we've looked at various verses. We're redeemed by what? The blood. The blood happened where? On Calvary. Our redemption comes, our sin debt is absolved on the cross. Our sin debt is what's been nailed to the cross, and we can forever go to that one sacrifice that happened. That one time.
That's why he said having this on.
Yeah, which is talking about death. He took away the sting, of death with that thing that he did. So
yeah, I wasn't trying to be. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I would say in this chapter you do see Paul combating the traditions of men that people are putting above and putting that on the people, as opposed, because he counters it earlier. Yeah, going with the circumcision thing and the philosophy and the empty deception. So in the chapter, we do see the idea of Paul coming against the traditions of men. We do absolutely see that in the chapter, but I don't see that being what is being spoken of in 14 and 15.
It seems like you and Christian are always going to be talking about that. Study. I said it seems like you and Christian are always going to be talking about that.
Well, yeah. Okay, so did you have anything else to say about that?
Well,
Chris?
I don't want to drag it on, but all I wanted to say is that I agree that of course it's about the whole picture, but I was just talking about the piece of the picture, which was this verse talking about the ordinances. What I would say is that when you had back in those days, when you were seeking forgiveness for your sins, what did you have to do?
In the temple times, you had to take your offering to the sanctuary.
Exactly. And so now, by Christ laying down his life and becoming the sacrifice for all men, what do you have to do now?
Now you take your offering to Messiah.
Right. And what I'm saying is that in those days, the Pharisees and Sadducees were adding things to that forgiveness. That they were doing a lot of things that were prohibiting just poor people from being accepted, and they were putting things on top of the law to kind of make it more weightier for them to be acceptable in the sight of Yahweh. And if you were an Israelite, you weren't even allowed to come to the temple. And that's why, they looked at the Israelites as being Gentiles and that they were rejected. So there were a lot of ordinances that were against the whole children of Israel. And so that's all
Yeah. I don't know what happened to the video here. I'm just going to turn this part off because it's just me frozen back there. Anyway, you guys can still hear me. Okay, so when we look at 16, where it says, "Let no man therefore judge you in meat or drink, or respect a holy day, or new moon, or Sabbaths, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Messiah." When we look at that, when we see all of those things that come before, when we look at that, Paul here he gives us a reason. We look at 16 and 17, he gives us a reason to do the Shabbat and the new moons and the holy days and the drinks and the meats, because he says these things are a shadow, or the substance of these things is of Messiah. It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense for Paul to be talking against meats or drinks or holy days or new moons or Sabbath days, and then saying verse 17, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Messiah. Or what do New American Standard say?
Things which are a mere shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Messiah.
The substance of these things is of Messiah. So if he's saying that the substance of the new moon is of Messiah, the substance of the Sabbath day is of Messiah, the substance of the holy days is of Messiah, or the substance of these meats and drinks is of Messiah, then why would he be making the case for you not to do those things? That doesn't make any sense, right? So he has to be making the case for,
unless you have the thought process that if you have Messiah, then you don't need these. You know? And you can have that.
That's a terrible thought process.
If you have Messiah, then you don't need to have the feast days. You don't need to have a new moon, because those are just the shadow. But now that you have Messiah,
well, I think somebody who would be trying to come along and beguile me would try to tell me
that's I know. I'm saying that's what.
I think that somebody that would be trying to beguile me would be trying to say that, which he goes into.
And I mean, like, again, we're talking about, it could be, I could see three ways that this could come about. It could come about because the people are doing these things and they're like, but you guys aren't circumcised. So physically, you know what I mean? Like you sitting up here doing all this stuff and you're not even circumcised. Or it could be like how I just said, which I don't believe. Or it could be, you're doing these things and these are Gentile people, so they have people looking at them doing them and they're actually judging them. You know what I mean?
I think when you look at what a lot of the commentaries talk about, the fact that this was Gentiles in this place, and then you had the Jewish believers that would come and add restrictions and things to what they were doing, where Paul had to come back over top of them and kind of alleviate all of these things that was going on in terms of the people that was coming in, as he says, even beguiling them, and causing them to
philosophies and
have all of these things that were against what Paul was teaching, which yes was he comes right out and talks about this idea of these added
weights on them.
Yeah, these traditions of men. But when you look at 18, where it says, "Let no man beguile you of your reward in a voluntary humility and worshiping of angels, intruding into those things which you have not seen, vainly puffed up by his fleshly mind." When we talk about this idea of worshiping of angels, it's not talking about some spirits. It's talking about people. It's talking about men. It's talking about these people who want to sit up here and say that they have all of this spiritual revelation that they have to give, and they want you to sit up here and worship them and put all of your trust in them. And Paul sitting up there calling that some vainly puffed up fleshly mind.
That's what the people want you to call them rabbi. In the spirit of being called rabbi. Or in the spirit of
High exalted one.
yeah, the highly exalted one. Like, I'm saying in the spirit of that. People are called rabbi, but it's not in the spirit of highly exalted. That's what the Pharisees wanted. I mean, and that's why, I could see the whole thought process behind the ordinance being but it's just taking it to a broader level.
Yes, yeah. Because again, he says it again down in 20, right? Wherefore, if you be dead with Messiah from the rudiments of the world, again, the rudiments of the world is not dealing with the law, but it's dealing with you trusting in your own physical strength to be able to do the things of Yahweh.
You can do it in your own power.
So I can't sit up here and say, you need to be doing X, Y, Z. Right? But in your heart, it's not really, you're not, your heart ain't driving you to do it, but I'm sitting up here judging you like, you need to be on my level, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I'm taking you back to the rudiments, to the letter of the law. As where in the new covenant, we're dealing with the spirit of the law, is where Yahweh's trying to get you to a place where out of your relationship with him, it causes you to walk in a way, not me sitting up here making you do a thing. And so when we talk about this thing about if you be dead in Messiah from the rudiments of the world, why, as though living in the world, you are subject to ordinances, right? Or me trying to cause you to do something, right? Because I can't cause you to do nothing. Because if you're doing it because I'm making you do it, it don't mean nothing anyway. If I say, look, don't sit up here and eat that. Don't sit up here and be touching those things. You might not be eating it or touching it, but it ain't because in your heart you don't want to do it. It's because I said don't do it. That's the point. Okay, so what time is it? Okay, coming to a close here. When we look at these people over here, who Paul has to remind them that, again, we look at chapter 3. If you then be risen with Messiah, seek those things which are above. If you're risen with Messiah, seek those things which are above.
Mine says keep seeking.
New American Standard. It makes a case for itself in my heart every day. Right? So that should be your present reality, is seeking in your own heart those things which are of Yahweh. Not somebody trying to coerce you into doing it, but your heart actually turning towards the Father and walking in his way. Right? So again, when we look at all of this in totality and we see that, again, looking backwards, we looked at the feast days, we looked at these various commands. We look at those things in light of Yeshua. When we have that genuine relationship with Yeshua, a genuine relationship with Yeshua should cause you to want to do all the things that please him. Anytime you're doing something because somebody else is calling for you to do it, is worthless. It doesn't mean anything because your heart is not in it.
I mean, somebody could say something that word could bring conviction to you, but if you just do it because you don't want to make someone else feel some kind of way about you,
right? Then you just like these people over here, where it talked about these people that's worshiping angels. Where I'm more concerned about these people who want to sit up here and say that they have all of this knowledge, instead of worrying about the giver of all knowledge and wisdom and understanding, which is the Ruach HaKodesh, which we talked about at the beginning, right? Okay. Does anybody else have any emotion cracking up? Does anybody have any thoughts or comments about any of that thing before we? I don't know what happened to our video. It just crashed on us. Did that stop?
That's all.
Oh, we just don't have no video. Okay.
It's a joy to say Shabbat Shalom to everybody. Sorry we couldn't make it. Everybody in the house got sick, so we just fighting this over there. But it's a good that was a good service class, and it's feeling well.
Okay. Well, I hope that you guys. You know what? In this case, my brother, I'm glad that you.
Glad
I'm
you come over there.
I hate being sick.
Yeah, I feel you, man.
I don't covet your germs one bit.
That's fair. That's fair.
Well, I just pray that Yahweh will just bring healing to all them germs that y'all got over there, and just get y'all some vitamins and so on and so forth, and get well. Okay, I'm glad y'all come digitally anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry,
And,
I was just cold.
I feel you.
Yeah. Okay, well, we forgive you. Okay. Okay, all right, Lisa. Shabbat Shalom to you and to all of you. We'll go ahead and stop this
Bye,
broadcast.
Mrs. Lisa.